Hello, and welcome to Talking Shop with CTECS. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Talking Shop with CTECS. I am so pleased to join you for this wonderful session. I am Ellen Solik, privileged to be the Executive Director of the CTECS system. We are the Connecticut Technical Education and Career System, and I could not be more pleased to introduce to our listeners this afternoon a very special guest, Connecticut Senator Jan Hochadel. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
We are so glad to have you. Today's show is really centered around the opportunities that we at CTECS have to partner with amazing people such as Senator Hochadel to explore the ways in which we can not only expand the workforce in Connecticut, but so that we can begin to expand the programming, and also so that we can begin to work together to make sure that the program offerings we have here are in line with what burgeoning technology, aerospace, engineering and manufacturing, just to name a few, are all about, and what they're looking to do with us and for us. We were so fortunate that Senator Hochadel is a member of the CTECS family from long ago. I'm going to take just a minute, Senator, to pause and read for our listeners a bit about your background, because I think it will help them to understand what exactly our wonderful connection is all about. In November of 2022, Senator Hochadel was elected to represent the 13th Senate District, which covers Meriden and parts of Cheshire, Middletown, and Middlefield, Connecticut. Prior to joining the state Senate, Senator Hochadel was an engineer working for companies ranging from Omega Engineering in Stamford to Pfizer in Wallingford and New York. After her successful career in engineering, Jan began teaching physics and science at technical high schools in Connecticut, and as an 8th grade summer enrichment program instructor at Norwalk Community College. While teaching, Senator Hochadel shifted to another one of her passions, advocating for workers' rights. Her involvement with the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT in Connecticut, culminated in her becoming president of the 2015 of AFT Connecticut, where she represents 30,000 members working to ensure that they have fair pay, health care, a safe working environment, a voice in the workplace, and they are provided with the opportunity to retire with dignity. I love that. As a president of the AFT Connecticut, Jan worked closely with the state legislature and served on the negotiating team for the State Employee Bargaining Agent Coalition, otherwise known as CBAC in Connecticut. She is also a national vice president of AFT Washington, D.C., and co-titler of the Americas for Public Service International, or PSI. If that isn't enough, Senator Hochadel is the mother of 3 children and has lived in Connecticut since her days as a student at the University of New Haven, where she earned her degree in mechanical engineering. Jan also has a Master of Science degree in education and a 6-year diploma from Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. Needless to say, you are an amazing force, both in technical education and in support of the workforce that we are trying so hard to develop in Connecticut. Welcome to the show, Jan.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Some people say it's a lot. I just didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up and finally found it.
And we're the benefactors, so welcome. So let's talk a little bit more about your focus in terms of what we do at CTECS, how we came together through your leadership with AFT Connecticut, and maybe the third prong of this is how we got into the conversation around aerotech programming and development of a school, which we'll get into in just a minute.
Yeah, so thank you for that. as you mentioned, in addition to the things that I do here in Connecticut, I'm also a national AFT vice president, and being part of that is I am the chair of the technical education committee for AFT. So I've had the opportunity to travel to different countries. As a matter of fact, last year I went to Germany, and our focus there was to look at what other countries are doing about apprenticeship programs. And Germany was fascinating to me because they almost have two different tracks of education that start when they're very, very young. The students decide if they're going to go on to higher education to become a lawyer or a doctor, things that we would consider, in the higher education realm here, or if they're going to go directly into work. And that is a whole separate system, very much like our CTECS, but more involved with industry partners. By the time they get to 10th, our equivalent of 10th grade, they're already out in the workforce for companies, still getting their high school credits, but being paid in an apprenticeship program. So I came back from Germany and said, why are we not doing more of that here? We've always had the trades. The building trades especially have been the backbone. And we're not saying get rid of those, but I think we need to focus on the industries that are around our schools and what are their needs, and how do we partner and become true partners in that.
Absolutely, and it's so much of the work now that we're all engaged in, really from a statewide perspective and truly nationally as well, Senator, as you are so well aware. What was the aha moment for you when you began to think about the aerotech piece of this and how we could come together and begin to build partnerships, not only between CTECS and the wonderful work that you're doing, but as business and industry in Connecticut and the aerotech picture that is a part of that? What made you put all this together in such a wonderful way?
Yeah, and I have to give a big shout out to two people. One is State Representative Liz Linehan, who has been talking about an aerospace high school somewhere in Connecticut for so many years. And she introduced me to Mark Natty, who works at Pratt & Whitney, also a Meriden resident where I live. So we had many, many conversations. And he would say to me that, CTECS has our adult aerospace programs, where they get some of the folks that they hire. There's also an aviation high school in New York City where they get students after they graduate. But there wasn't that true German model where students can go to high school, get something like an airframe license, and do an apprenticeship directly with a corporation that leads them into a natural pathway. And that was the aha moment. It was like, we're missing this small portion of that puzzle, and our CTECS system is the perfect fit for that.
Well, we are so glad that you put the pieces together and that we're such a big part of the picture. I should update our audience a bit because a lot has transpired in terms of bringing those prongs together, and I've been privileged to be much a part of it, and that's really how you and I were introduced and began to get to know each other a bit better, which is such a wonderful opportunity. We did tour the entire Pratt & Whitney facility in Middletown this summer. And Senator Hochadel, a large contingent of CTECS consultants, teachers, and administrators went along with you and others on that tour. We learned a tremendous amount.
Yes, we did.
And I think one of the most important things we learned from Pratt & Whitney leaders is that it's been such a challenge for them to reach out and find a workforce that's really well trained and ready to go and literally hit the floor running, if you will. Yep. And so it supports that fundamental idea that if we could create a holistic aerospace school, aerotech school, that Pratt & Whitney could be a direct partner with, so that the curriculum, the apprenticeships, all of that really directly line up with the work that they need to do, then we're providing that workforce to them directly. And I think that's really what the beginning discussions in the tour have been around. Yeah. And again, to have you on board is such a crucial component of that whole concept.
Thank you so much. I've often said that the CTECS system is the best kept secret in Connecticut. I don't think the average citizen realizes the skilled workforce, the students that come out that have been holding a wrench, if you will, for 4 years. They don't have to be as trained to go into some of these like highly technical jobs, and they're taught those soft skills about, you know, being polite, making sure that you go to work on time, making sure that you're doing everything you can. Our students learn that along with all the other highly skilled things that they need.
They do, and we've heard that so many times from business and industry partners who are so glad to get our students because of that, because they are understanding that it's important to be on time, that it's important to complete a job start to finish. All of those, as you said so well, soft skills, we're calling them core skills these days simply because without those, you know, the technical know-how doesn't always translate, as you know.
That's right.
So I want to bring us back to Pratt & Whitney for a minute. We have yet to sit back down with them. Our initial discussions really were framed around that wonderful tour that you and CTECS, again, administrators and instructors went on as well this summer prior to the summer actually, to the school in New York City to see what that configuration really was all about, and could we come up with something similar to that, or even bigger and better than that, that would serve the needs for CTECS and also for Pratt & Whitney. And we've had some great initial discussions around that, I think. And yet since then, I think we've learned a lot from Pratt & Whitney about what their needs actually are, and what the legislation is around it, what we would have to take a look at. So I'm anticipating that next discussion is going to be even more committed to what do we need for space, what is it that we can do perhaps without reinventing the wheel that's going to provide them with that opportunity for our students to become Pratt & Whitney employees eventually.
And I think it is a big education for the public and the legislature. The public as general, or in general I should say, you know, they have this notion that every student should be going on to higher education. And just from the German model, we know not every student wants to go on for higher education or needs to. You know, we have put out plumbers, electricians, you know, that have gone right into their trades, have built their houses, put their own children through education, and never had a student debt. And I think we actually have to say, let's step back. And what are the industry needs here in Connecticut, like at Pratt & Whitney? What do they need? What are they looking for? And how can we get those skills to those students while they're still in high school so that they can go directly into a well-paid union job starting at over $70,000 again? And then they may choose to go on to higher education at a later date, but the company actually helps you with it. And again, it's that no student debt, that no burdens, but still getting that successful career that everybody should be entitled to.
Absolutely. It is such a healthy cultural shift, I think, that certainly many, many families are making in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And that is, as you just highlighted, do we really want to set up our students so that when they graduate from 4 years of a college, they're in debt for hundreds of thousands of dollars? Right. Certainly nobody wants that. But more important, I think people across the workforce are beginning to understand that there can be a partnership, right, between, as you just said so well, between pursuing a trade and enhancing pursuit of that trade, certainly with schooling, with additional experience. You are an expert in actually in doing that, but yet it doesn't have to be exclusive to one or the other.
That's right.
It could really be a healthy combination of both. Yeah. And I know you've worked with Governor Lamont, as I have, around those kinds of partnerships. And in fact, we're both involved in a group now that the governor has put together in a task force to do just that. Feel free, because you're a wealth of knowledge around that whole piece.
I just, we've had industry partners come to us before, and they wanted us to produce almost widgets that would just pigeonhole these students going directly into some type of corporation. I think what we're looking at now is the broader picture. How can we equip these students with, like we're talking about, an airframe license that would go right into something like a Pratt & Whitney, but it's not pigeonholing them. They can go to Sikorsky. They can go to work at one of the airports. It's a portable license and skills that, again, goes into these careers. And that's what we have to be looking for. How do we get skills and licenses for these students so that then they can go on and fly anywhere that they want to? And we have enough corporations, industries here in Connecticut. We need to survey them and say, what are those licenses, those certifications that we need to provide for these students? I can think of one right off the bat. We're having a huge crisis, supposedly, for nurses. Although there's, thousands of nurses out there, they just don't want to go to work for some of these corporations. How do we actually get students into fields, again, without that student debt? How do we create programs for like CNAs that then they go to work for a hospital, the hospital then pays for them to become an LPN or to become a nurse or become a doctor? The field is wide open. Those are the pathways that I think we have to start looking at.
Absolutely. And what I'm noticing as a trend as well is that there is more and more funding, both at the state and federal level, that's going to afford students the opportunity to really do that dual credit or dual partnership programming that you just talked about. In fact, CTECS, long ago and far away, we used to offer an LPN program.
Yes.
And I'm sure you were very familiar with that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess because either through attrition or the perception that there wasn't the market for it, unfortunately, CTECS let go of the program. Now there's this huge burgeoning need, right, for LPNs. So we're in conversation with the community colleges to say, gee, could we possibly create a dual pathway for students so they would get their basic health instruction with us at CTECS and then go on to pursue an LPN. And there's actually an abundance of funding becoming available to enable our students to do that. As you said, it's debt-free, which is just so exciting.
And our Department of Labor does an awesome job with our apprentices, especially all the programs and getting some of those fundings, like you said, from federal. I know the system takes advantage of the Perkins money, which also, as we open new apprenticeships, there's funding that way. So I think, again, we just have to be creative and find out what those industries are. What are those pathways we can get, and then see where we can get the funding. But I do think we have to, again, educate the legislature, because one of the other misconceptions is, it's a high school, so every time there's a change to the graduation requirements, they're put on the system as well. And like I said, not every student wants or needs to go to college, and that's their focus. So I do think we have to start having the conversations. What are the needs and the focus of this system, so that we're not burdening the students with things that they're not going to need or want at a later time?
Absolutely. As a senator in Connecticut, Jan, what are you hearing on the floor, if you will, in terms of overall Senate initiatives, Senate focus areas around work-based development and in more in particular, perhaps expansion of those workforce opportunities? And do you feel like you are, you're certainly not a contributor, but do you feel like you're a primary voice in some of the work that they're seeing that needs to be done?
Unfortunately, I'm not on the education committee, so I don't have a direct voice there. But I think a lot of folks know that I always will be considered a teacher, been in the system, so there are a lot of conversations that are being had. I think one of the focus has always been on machine shop. Everybody's always talking about we can't get enough folks in those areas. I worked in a machine shop, and I can tell you when I left that 5 years later, the equipment had completely changed. And I think that's where people just don't understand is, yes, we need this skilled workforce, but we have to keep up to industry. In the technical high school, that's, getting those programs, those machines, we also need the funds. We also need to make sure that our educators have the professional development that they need so that they're keeping up, because now they've been out of industry maybe 2 or 3 years, and again, they can't be left behind. And those are the things that make us very unique from the regular high school systems, and it's why we need to keep fighting for more funding for our systems so that we can keep up with the needs in the industries.
Absolutely, and I have to say the governor members of the Senate and the House both. Last year I had the privilege of appearing before some of all of those groups, and the basic support is definitely there. I think they're very excited about the work that we're doing, about the partnerships that we're forming, because we're really learning that we can't do it alone, and we can't continue to work in silos.
That's right.
Even though those siloed efforts are wonderful, it doesn't create a force powerful enough to really change the culture, as you highlighted earlier, and also to provide that fiscal support. Because right now, even as we are looking at the manufacturing trades and the huge changeover almost overnight in the equipment that our students are demanded to be facile with, that's expensive.
Yes.
It's an expensive proposition. Our business partners are doing an amazing job of helping us in terms of that support, but we definitely will need the fiscal support at the state level. There's no question, because it's daunting, as it is in public education everywhere, that the needs of students just keep growing, and that equipment component for us, as you mentioned, is key.
As if we go back to the Pratt & Whitney partnership, in order to actually train these students so that they can pass that airframe license, they're going to need engines, they're going to need propeller, they're going to need planes to work on. And I hope that also comes out of the partnership, but there is going to be a fiscal impact. And we just need, again, to educate the legislature that this money isn't just going, I don't know, for paper or whatever. This is going towards something that's truly, truly needed for those students to be successful. And I see coming down the line, green energy, for example. I had a bill last year. I'm the co-chair of the Environmental Committee, and it was the Carbon Neutral School Bill. And what we wanted to do was work with Green Bank so that every school system, every district, would be able to get an assessment on their schools on how could they improve their green energy, ultimately saving taxpayers money in the long run. And my thought was, right here we have an opportunity that could be done by students in the CTECS system. But it's how do we get into those well-needed industries? We need the funds in order to do that. Absolutely.
In fact, our transportation consultant, Lou Camacho, who does an amazing job for us, discovered a $7 million grant last year for just the kind of work that you're highlighting. And this grant was dedicated toward the purchase of electric buses. Yeah. So CTECS was awarded 21 electric buses last year. But when you really think about it, 21 buses for our potentially almost 12,000 student population, it doesn't touch what we ultimately would need, and we're already up to $7 million. That's really without charging stations and all of the other work that would go with that. So it's a daunting task. There is no question. But I was smiling earlier when we were talking about the aerospace equipment that's needed, and I'll share this quick story with our listeners. In serving in schools for many, many years, I certainly was used to getting phone calls about, gee, Dr. Solik, we need staffing over at a certain school, or we need XYZ supplies at a certain school, which would be typical, sort of pen, paper, and cleaning supplies, right? I got a call from last year's principal at Bristol Tech. His name is John Ryan, and John calls me and says, Dr. Solik, if you have a minute, I have to talk to you because I have a line in on buying a jet engine, and I need you to really tell me whether this is okay. And I thought to myself, this is a first for me, that I've never sanctioned the purchase of a jet engine, and yet it illustrated so well that we're in it. We are in it, hook, line, and sinker, and particularly the whole aerotech aspect. But that, as you said, we've got to look at buying jet engines because that's what our students learn on. Yeah. We've got to look at buying the technology components for airplanes and jets, because when people board those planes, they're used to Wi-Fi, they're used to instant access to movies, all that technology, never mind the safety and security piece. And all of that has to be purchased in some shape or fashion so our kids can learn.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to work together to make that happen legislatively and every other way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, going forward.
I am here for that. And I just want to give a shout out to the instructors because that's the other piece, coming from industry. I know it was a pay cut to come into education, but it was something that I was passionate about and love. And I know, especially our trade teachers are the same way. They could be definitely making more money out in the industry, but they do it because they love the students and love what they're doing. But we need to look at that. Like, we need to be able to pay these instructors what they're worth and what they're giving back to the communities.
Could not agree more. And these people have been usually in their trades for a number of years.
Yeah.
And the amount of experience
Yes.
and practitioner value they bring to our programs is just, it's almost without measure.
It's
So
that
I
word,
couldn't
but it's
agree
priceless.
more to you. Yeah, very truly. The fact that they flock to us because they know that the work is so valuable that they're going to be able to do. And so much of that value is made up intrinsically rather than in the dollars
That's right.
that it makes a huge difference. But I agree with you. I think if we could advocate for compensation for educators across the United States,
Yes.
I'll take this opportunity to do
Amen.
that, because and administrators for that matter.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the core topic for our day today. We talked about it a minute ago. There has still not been a full cultural shift yet I think for people in general around, gosh, do I want to send my student into a trade because their recollection of the trades might be a dirty shop floor, dark, sort of
Greasy
dingy
fingernails.
setting. Exactly. And you and I know it's come so far since then. In fact, if you walk into our classrooms, as you know, Jan, right now, you could literally eat off the floor or do anything else. That the shops that now exist in Connecticut in particular the expectation level has been raised so high that most of these students are amazed when they go in for the first time and really see what the shop floors look like, what the settings look like and feel like. So I guess my question, and this is just a sort of think aloud question, is how do we convey that? How do we begin to help people make that cultural shift that the trades are not a second-rate endeavor to go into? The trades are not a dark and dirty and dingy sort of second choice because, that might be all there is. It's come so far since then. Even if you go into auto shops these days, where, again, in the good old days, we all remember the small little shops behind the gas station that you wouldn't walk into. Even if you were working there, you would walk into them. And it's so different now. What are your thoughts around that?
I had the opportunity many, many years ago to hear President Biden speaking at an AFL-CIO convention. And it always stuck with me because he said, we're always going to need our electricians, our plumbers. They're vital to our society. And that's what our trade schools, were producing at the time. He said, everybody wants those, but they just don't want it for their own kid. Mm-hmm. And so we have to get to the parents. We have to educate the parents about what a technical school can offer. I went to a technical high school. It happened to be in Massachusetts, sorry. But I went on for engineering and, different pathways, and here I am. They're not the old trade schools. They're not, what you used to see. It's not about keeping people down. We're now trying to lift people up. And honestly, I think the best way we do that is to start expanding with those partnerships with industries. So if we were to take a Vinyl Tech and have that we then just have to tell the parents what this program is, how their children would apply for it, what they would get. We just have to educate our parents and expand.
That's such a great and inspirational thought that you just raised, because I could envision inviting parents into a forum like this to talk about what are their concerns, what are their misconceptions, what are they beginning to discover about really what the trades can offer for their children, and the kinds of successes that you so well highlighted at the beginning around now our kids are self-sufficient, now they're raising a family, purchasing homes, buying cars with no underlying debt, and it's a huge plus.
Yeah.
Never mind the work sites themselves
Yeah.
and all that is to offer. So it's exciting work. It really
It
is
is.
such a wonderful opportunity to have you on today, but
Thank
also
you.
to talk about the partnership potential. And I envision us marching forward with Pratt & Whitney with lots of good news and shortly,
Yes.
and in the conversations to come.
Very excited.
And Senator, I can't thank you enough for coming in today and sharing your expertise, your vision, and all your experience, and also your connection with us. We always highlight the fact that we are members of a huge and wonderful family known as CTECS,
Yeah.
and you're an endeared member of that family. So thank you so much for your support.
Thank you for the invitation.
And for today.
Anytime I can promote the system, it's my pleasure. I live it, I breathe it. My son went through the program, just graduated, and with a degree in computers and electronics. Truly believe it in my soul that it's the best thing that has ever been offered in Connecticut.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.